Hello, this is Dr. Chuck. This is just going to be a audio lecture. I seem to be having some problems with my webcam, and I have a digital camera that I use for lectures and other settings, but I don't have that with me. So I'm just going to give you a quick audio here. I've been messing with it for a couple days, and I think I need a new webcam. So discussion question 2 is, using what you have learned in this week's readings, do some external research using the text and some outside sources, and analyze at least 3 ways to use quality control in the gathering on secondary data. And again, I want you to analyze these 3 ways. Don't just tell me 3 ways, but analyze those. Why are they good? Why are they bad? Where are their strong points, their weak points? Where are they most useful? Where are they least useful? So think about the application of this instead of just telling me what 3 quality control ideas are. So analyze those. And so let's talk real quick about the levels of information. We've got primary sources. Those might be memos or letters, or if you do an interview at work, you're trying to get information from a survey, that's primary sources. A speech is given and you're sitting there listening to the speech. But again, if that speech uses secondary sources, you have to look at the data that they're using in the speech. Is that secondary data or primary data? Is this first-hand knowledge or second-hand knowledge? Loss could be a primary source of information. And maybe internal records. If I'm going to collect data in an organization, I go to a database and that data was collected at that organization, that's an internal record, and that could be primary sources. Again, you want to watch, was that data taken from secondary sources? Now, secondary sources are usually considered like encyclopedias. They'll repeat studies that were done, but it's a secondary source. Textbooks are secondary sources. Handbooks, magazines, newspapers, newscasts. Those are all secondary sources of information. The research is done, and usually those are reported out in some of these other medias. So what are some of the objectives of secondary searches? Why would you have to do secondary searches? Why not just primary searches? Sometimes you do it to expand the understanding of the management dilemma. Gathering background information. Secondary sources could be, again, background information can come from outside sources, from the newspaper, from journal magazines, from other articles that are out there. You're gathering some background information for the research you're doing. Identifying the information that should be gathered. Some of the objectives are identify sources for and actual questions that might be used. Sometimes if you do outside research, what questions around the management dilemma you have, what other questions have been asked by other agencies or other businesses? Maybe you can use some of those same type of questions. So that's some of the reasons why you want to do secondary research. Identify sources for and the actual sample frames that might be used. So again, these are all different reasons why you will do secondary research or look for secondary sources. The key thing about this question is evaluating those sources. Remember, when I use any type of secondary information, we've already learned, or we'll also learn more about bias in primary research. There can be the bias of the person who's doing the research, the bias of the participant, the bias of the person who's writing up the report. Well, imagine now you've got the possibility of bias at those levels. Now you're looking at secondary sources who are reporting out those levels. It's just like history. We really don't know history because all we know is what was told to us by those who observed and what they remembered and what they decided to report. It is just as important what is left out than as what is put in. So when we evaluate information from these sources, we have to consider that. We have to consider, when I look at outside information, what was the purpose of this secondary source? Is it part of to sell you something? Is it selling a certain product? Is it trying to push an idea or a philosophy? What is the purpose behind that information that you're using? That could affect the quality of it. The format could affect the quality of it. How is it laid out? Is it laid out in such a manner that it's trying to draw your attention to a specific area, to a certain bias? The audience that it was intended for. Are you using this secondary data? It's intended for maybe one audience, but you're a different audience and you're using it, again, for a different audience. So who was the information meant for? What is the scope of the project? Maybe the scope you're looking at, it was smaller in scope and you need something larger in scope. So you want to look at the scope of it and also the authority. Where did this come from? It's, example, a lot of people, especially in undergraduate work and even in graduate work, will use Wikipedia. Well, Wikipedia is a source that's open to anyone to add to that. You, me, anyone at any level could go into Wikipedia and add information. Someone else may go in there and refute that, but it's pretty much open to the general public. Not the best source for solid research. So again, the authority behind the research. Are the experts in the field? Do they have a bias? Do they have a reason for writing that? Who wrote this? There's lots and lots and lots of information on the internet, but just because it's on the internet doesn't necessarily mean it's accurate and it's true. So again, those are some of the areas that you want to evaluate the information sources. So again, as you analyze this, look at some of the quality controls that you can do for analyzing data and analyzing secondary sources. And again, that's what that discussion question is about. Hopefully for our assignment and going forward, either I'll get a new webcam or I'll use my digital camera. Thanks.